Welcome back, my PetaPixel party poopers. It is Chris Nichols here, and look at this. I've got a Panasonic S9 in my hands again. When we first took a look at this in Osaka, Japan, we called this camera baffling. You know, it was a weird camera, came with this very terrible lens cap lens, and it just didn't make a lot of sense. Weird recording limits, all this kind of stuff. Well, we've had two very important updates since then. The first major thing is we have a brand new 18-40, kind of intended as a kit lens, and I really wish I had this in the streets of Osaka, Japan. The other big major update is to firmware. It changes things like record limits, video capabilities. Jordan's gonna talk about that anyways. You're gonna love it, so stay tuned.
Hey there, it's Jordan Drake interrupting to remind you that Panasonic actually has a history of making some of the best kit lenses of all time, and those are all available from our friends at KEH.com. And you could look at the classic Panasonic 20mm f1.7, which is a lens I would say largely legitimized mirrorless cameras in the first place. Or hey, how about the Panasonic 12-60 f2.8-4, a kit lens with the GH4 that's so good we still use it for doing product shots to this day. Or an L-mount, how about that 20-60mm? As I mentioned, all of these great lenses are available at KEH.com, backed with a 180-day warranty, and if you're not completely satisfied, you generally have a 21-day return policy. So if you're looking for a legendary Panasonic lens or any pre-owned photo or video gear, the best place to go is KEH.com. That's why they're PetaPixel's official pre-owned camera gear partner. Back to Chris.
So Panasonic is intending for this 18-40 to be a new kit lens that you can get with the Panasonic S9. It's kit lens in a sense. I mean, to me, this is an ultra-wide zoom. I prefer something a little bit more general purpose myself, but I think a lot of people will like this. It would certainly be handy in street situations like we had in Osaka the first time. But I could also see a lot of people picking this up as an extra affordable, compact little travel landscape lens for maybe a higher-end camera like their Panasonic S5 II, for example. And this is absolutely very lightweight and very compact. The first thing you notice, only 155 grams, you can take it anywhere. Now, despite the very lightweight, when I get it in hand here, it actually feels quite solid. I was really impressed by just the overall build quality right off the bat. So first off, this is weather sealed to some degree. We got rubber mounts here around the lens mount. Panasonic say it's actually better sealed than the S9 itself, so I guess that's a good thing. It's gonna survive. But even the collapsible lens design, obviously these are gonna be wobbly to some degree, but this is actually quite a bit more solid than you find on a lot of the other collapsible lenses that you can get. As well, the manual focus ring, surprisingly smooth. It's small, but the solid knurling here means that you can find it very easily, and it actually has a really nice, smooth pull to it. I also like that they've included an autofocus manual focus selector switch, because that manual focus is so nice to use, and especially for video applications, I want to have quick access to that without having to go into the menu and turn autofocus off, manual focus on. I always dislike doing that. It doesn't have image stabilization in the lens, but that's okay because the S9, as well as pretty much all the Panasonic bodies, feature good IBIS in there, so you're still going to get stabilization. God help you if you try to put on like a Sigma FPL. Okay, so just doing some quick flare tests out here with the 18-40. So first off, I'm actually very impressed by how well this lens handles flare. We're not really getting much loss of contrast. You know, it's doing a really good job. And ghosting, even when stopped down heavily, is very minimal. Unfortunately though, for a lens that you might want to use for landscape shots or, you know, in the city kind of stuff like this, the Sunstars really suck. I mean, they're just bland and flat. You're not getting any definition. It's yucky. Now, what you want in a little lens like this is good versatility, and this actually has a really decent close-up for the occasional macro shot. It does its best work at 21mm. You're certainly going to get that wide-angle perspective, really push that background far away, and actually it does a pretty good macro. I mean, 0.28 magnification, basically 1:3 life-size reproduction. That's not bad for a walk-around little do-it-all lens. But we also had an opportunity to test bokeh with the same shot, and this is not so good. So you can see here the bokeh shooting wide open, very busy, onion rings like crazy, very strong soap bubble effect around the bokeh. And you can see how the focus transitions are then quite rough and the background looks very frenetic. When we stop down a bit, quite polygonal look to any sort of specular highlights as well, very distracting. Keep in mind, this is a fairly slow lens, so as far as soft bokeh goes, you're only usually going to see it when you're focusing up close like this, but do keep in mind, if you want that shallow depth of field look, this is pretty distracting. We do want to test focus breathing because this might be used for video applications. The Panasonic S9 is intended to be a creator's camera for both photography as well as videography, mostly social media posts. In focus breathing is where you get that field of view change as you focus from infinity down to your closest focusing distance and back again. Here looking at the 18mm, you can see a fair amount of breathing. You can see those buildings, especially on the sides, really change quite a bit. And then again at 40mm, basically the same effect. A lot of focus breathing here. So if you're gonna do focus pulls and transitions, expect that your field of view is gonna change. Now I did also want to see if this lens is sharp. You know, for this affordable little kit lens, can it give us sharp results? I tested on the Panasonic S9 because I do feel like that's where most people are going to use it. Broke at the test charts. I mean, there's nothing stopping you from throwing this on an S1R if you wanted to, I suppose, but I feel like this is a more realistic use case. And actually the sharpness was pretty impressive. So we're looking at the center at 18mm at f4.5. You can see actually quite decent sharpness. When we stop down the lens to f8, we're not really gaining much as far as detail goes, just a little bit more contrast. The corners, they are a little bit soft, wide open, as you can see here. Stopping down helps a little bit. We do definitely get more contrast, but those corners never come quite into absolute sharp focus. Okay, so what about at the longer end, 40mm? Very similar story. Again, I actually like the detail I'm getting. This is at f6.3 here in the centers, and you can see it's quite sharp. Going to f8, slight contrast boost. We're not really gonna notice much though at that point. We're already stopped down so much. Corners though, again, they don't really sharpen up. As you can see here at f6.3, that corner is still quite soft, and going to f8 doesn't help too much. So this is a lens that definitely does deliver sharpness, but the corners just never quite get there. All right, so that does it for a quick little lens test here on the new 18 to 40mm lens. But now let's go to Jordan. He's gonna talk about whether the major firmware updates will make the Panasonic S9 a more compelling product.
All right, it's Jordan here being recorded on the Panasonic S9 in 6K open gate recording. And this is something I would not have filmed myself with previously, because when this camera first came out, it had extremely restrictive record cutoffs on it. Shooting open gate 6K, it would cut you off at 10 minutes. If you were recording 4K, it would cut you off at 15 minutes. And we very quickly learned that this was kind of more restrictive than it needed to be. As soon as the recording cut off, you could just start recording again and go for a very long time. So on the latest firmware of the S9, it gives you the option to disable those record limits and just let the camera get quite hot. And when we did this, I was very surprised to find out that recording even 6K open gate, all of your 4K modes up to 30 frames per second, it would actually run until the battery died. I got just over an hour and 20 minutes before battery died, camera shut off. We did get an overheat warning at 50 minutes, but again, compared to the 10 minutes that it cut you off at out of the box, this is a huge improvement. The only record mode I was able to test where it was thermally limited is 4K 60, but there I was still able to record 50 minutes of video before it overheated and the camera shut down. So this is a massive improvement if you want to do something like film yourself like I am right now. You can comfortably get well over an hour with the standard record modes. For me, the biggest other improvement with this new firmware has to do with the frame lines. Now, one of the big advantages of recording open gate like we are right now is you could reframe for different aspect ratios, say 16:9 or vertical as well. But the problem is, previously it could only display one frame line, and the whole idea of shooting open gate for me is to be able to deliver in multiple aspect ratios. So this new firmware allows you to put multiple frame lines on screen to help with your composition, and it doesn't just stick them right to the middle of the frame. You can move them around, and this really does make it a whole lot easier to pre-visualize, hey, the shot that I've got, is it gonna actually work in vertical and 16:9 or 2:3 and 16:9? There's a lot of flexibility here. It makes not only that 6K open gate record mode a whole lot more useful, but also that compressed open gate that they introduced with the S9. So between the new lens and these firmware updates, does that make the S9 a more compelling camera? Let's go talk to Chris and find out.
Okay guys, let's touch on the lens here first. I mean, I was actually really impressed by how well built it is. I thought it was gonna be a plastic piece of junk, but it's actually a really nice package to have there with the S9 just to walk around. And you know, I think for the stuff that I was doing with it, like, you know, getting architecture, shooting ultra wide stuff of buildings, whatnot, I think it does a great job, and it's a nice little walk around little kit lens for the S9. Optically though, it didn't really blow me away. I mean, I think the sun stars are ugly, the bokeh is yucky, this lens doesn't really have any interesting character to it, but it's sharp enough and it resists flare enough, and that's about it. Still, I think the key thing here is really just that compact package and how convenient it is, and it is a fairly affordable lens, especially if you pair it with an S9. You know, when we were in Osaka, I know I keep talking about this, but I ended up bringing Sigma Contemporary Primes just because I wanted something that was appropriate for the size of this camera, and I think a lot of people get a lot of use use out of this, just as a handy walk around lens. And for video work, I think it'd also be a fantastic vlog lens, and that's where that more ultra wide design makes sense. Now, on the topic of firmware and video, that is where I think we've got some big improvements here with the S9. I mean, just the fact that we can shoot that open gate recording now and have the frame lines set that all up so that if you are going to do social media posts and go vertical or horizontal for your YouTube channel, that actually makes a lot of sense. It means you don't have to reshoot things over and over and over. The record limit really opens up the possibility now to use this camera for shooting at your desk in your studio, or doing your own YouTube stuff to camera. I think that makes a ton of sense as well. Now, for me personally, the S9, I mean, it's not as confusing as it used to be, but it's still not that compelling. I absolutely understand what Panasonic is trying to do with this camera, and I think some people out there will find a lot of merit in having a little package like this. But what I enjoyed most when I was shooting it was actually the real-time LUT support, to be able to go into Lumix Labs and make my own LUTs, and that's now opening up to the rest of the lineup. But there's still a lot of things that have to change here to make this package compelling for me. Whatever the second version of the S9 is, I want that mechanical shutter, or at least electronic front curtain, for example. I want an EVF on there, absolutely, and a headphone jack. I mean, I think those are improvements that could be made to make this far more compelling for me. As it is now, I also would prefer a lens that's more general purpose. So an S5 II with a 20 to 60, I still think that's a more compelling product. But I'll leave it up to you guys if you think that this now breathes new life into the S9 for you. Leave those comments below and let us know what you think. We'll check those out. We'll even answer some of them on the PetaPixel podcast. You can listen to it on all your favorite podcasting apps, or just keep watching right here on this channel. And hey, while you're at it, why don't you check out store.petapixel.com, check out all our merch. Thanks for joining us here on PetaPixel today. We'll see you soon with more very shortly.